I failed my goal. I missed it by a wide margin, and somehow, this is the first time that failure didn't break me. That should scare you, because it means the real ending of this story has nothing to do with success. Welcome to Deep Body Lab. I want to be upfront with you from the very first seconds, because this isn't one of those videos where everything ties up nicely at the end. There is no dramatic reveal, no magic number crossed, no triumphant before and after moment that makes you feel inspired for 5 minutes and empty again by tomorrow. I didn't break 400 pounds in 100 days. I started around 460. Today, I'm around 440. And here's the part that feels almost illegal to say out loud. I'm not disappointed. For a long time, I believed that hitting a number would change me, that once I crossed a specific line, something inside would finally click, that the constant mental noise would quiet down, that I'd feel like I had arrived, like there would be a clear separation between the person I was and the person I was supposed to become. But that moment never came. Instead, something quieter happened, something harder to explain, something most people don't notice until years later, if they ever notice it at all. And that's what this video is really about. Not weight loss, not discipline, not even progress in the way we usually define it. It's about what changes when you stop reacting the same way you always have. If you've ever set an aggressive goal and tied your self-worth to the outcome, you already know the pressure I'm talking about. The kind that tells you, if you don't hit this, it means something about you. The kind that turns effort into fear and fear into exhaustion. That's where I was heading again. Same pattern, same expectations, same finish line fantasy. But this time, when I didn't get there, something unexpected happened. I stayed. I didn't collapse. I didn't spiral. I didn't erase everything and tell myself I'd start over for real next time. And that difference, small as it sounds, changed everything. Before we go any further, if content like this resonates with you, honest, uncomfortable, and grounded in real experience, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps Deep Body Lab grow, and it gives me the motivation to keep making videos that go deeper than surface-level advice. Because what you're about to hear isn't a success story. It's something much more dangerous than that. Now, let me ask you a question, and I want you to answer it honestly in the comments. When you miss a goal, what hurts more? A, the result itself. B, the way you react afterward. Comment A or B below. And to understand why not breaking this time mattered so much, you have to understand why everything felt so easy at the beginning. Coming off the 75 Soft Challenge, I was riding something powerful. Momentum. Not motivation, not hype. Momentum. The kind that makes effort feel lighter than it actually is. I had already proven to myself that I could follow rules, show up daily, and finish what I started. That alone changed how I moved through my days. Walking wasn't a chore. Tracking food didn't feel like restriction. Consistency felt natural, almost automatic. That's the dangerous part no one warns you about. When things start working, your brain quietly rewrites the story. It stops saying, "This is something I'm doing," and starts saying, "This is who I am now." And once that shift happens, confidence begins to outpace reality. You look at the past few weeks and assume the future will behave the same way. The conditions that created the momentum fade into the background, and all you see is the result. That's how the goal became aggressive. On paper, it didn't look insane. 60 pounds in 100 days, 4 to 5 pounds a week. Numbers like that sound intense, but they're easy to rationalize when you're already losing weight and feeling good. I wasn't being reckless. I wasn't chasing a fantasy. I genuinely believed I was accounting for effort, discipline, and structure. What I didn't account for was how much of that early success was borrowed energy. Momentum is not neutral. It amplifies belief. And belief, when unchecked, creates a subtle arrogance. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind that whispers, "You've unlocked something now. This time is different." It convinces you that you've permanently upgraded your capacity, when in reality, you're still standing on a very specific set of circumstances. Good weather, higher baseline energy, the novelty of a new challenge, the psychological high of completion still lingering in your system. The brain doesn't like to admit that those things matter. It prefers clean narratives. If effort equals result now, then effort will equal result later. That logic feels fair. It feels earned. And that's why aggressive goals sneak in without triggering alarm bells. They don't feel reckless. They feel deserved. The mistake wasn't aiming high. The mistake was assuming that early momentum was proof of long-term stability. I treated a temporary state as a permanent upgrade. And once you do that, every future slowdown feels like a personal failure instead of a predictable shift. That's the trap. Because when confidence is built on momentum instead of adaptability, it only works as long as nothing changes, and real life is always changing, whether you're ready for it or not. At the time, I didn't see it. I thought I was being disciplined, strategic, ambitious in the right way. But in hindsight, I can see the setup clearly. I wasn't overestimating my willpower. I was underestimating how fragile momentum actually is. And that misunderstanding is what made the next phase hit so hard. That misunderstanding didn't explode all at once. It revealed itself slowly, in ways that were easy to ignore until they weren't. The shift began quietly. Days grew shorter, mornings felt heavier. The kind of energy that used to carry me into movement without a second thought started asking for permission instead. Walking was no longer something that just happened, it became a choice, and every choice cost something. What surprised me most wasn't the drop in movement itself, but how invisible it felt while it was happening. There was no clear moment where I could point and say, "This is where things changed." Life simply recalibrated, and I failed to notice how much my system depended on the old settings. Winter doesn't announce itself, it creeps in. It drains small amounts of energy each day, just enough that you adapt without realizing you're adapting downward. And because I didn't adjust consciously, the gap between what I was doing and what my body could support kept widening. The biggest mistake wasn't losing activity, it was keeping everything else the same. I ate as if my output hadn't changed. The portions were familiar, the structure felt safe. It made sense emotionally, even though it no longer made sense physiologically. I wasn't overeating in a dramatic way, I was just eating inaccurately. And that kind of error is the hardest to detect because it doesn't feel like sabotage, it feels like routine. Eventually, progress slowed. Then it stopped. The scale didn't argue, it didn't fluctuate wildly, it just went quiet. And silence can be more unsettling than bad news. Silence leaves space for interpretation, and interpretation is where old narratives tend to resurface. This is usually the point where effort turns into frustration, where consistency feels pointless, where your mind starts searching for extremes, cut more, move more, punish harder, or for excuses to step away entirely. And heading into December, I knew exactly how dangerous that territory was for me. December has always been the month where structure dissolves, where one off day becomes a justification for 10, where progress isn't just paused, it's erased. In the past, I didn't slow down carefully, I collapsed. And once that happened, recovery took months. This time, something interrupted that pattern. Instead of reacting emotionally, I paused long enough to understand what was happening. The math was simple. Less movement, same intake, predictable outcome. There was nothing personal about it, no moral failure, no hidden flaw I needed to fix by force. That awareness changed the entire experience. When you understand the mechanism behind a stall, it loses its power to define you. It stops being a verdict and becomes information. And information doesn't require panic. It requires adjustment, patience, or sometimes acceptance. I didn't fix everything immediately. I didn't suddenly regain momentum, but I also didn't abandon the process. I stayed present through a phase that would have derailed me before, and that alone marked a shift I couldn't ignore. Because real life doesn't care about your plans, but it will always respond to how you handle friction. And staying present through that friction is where the real change quietly began. In the past, December was the month that erased everything. It wasn't dramatic at first. It started with small permissions, skipping a walk here, loosening structure there. Then came the familiar logic. It's the holidays, I'll reset in January. That sentence alone used to give me permission to disappear. Once the idea of a reset entered my mind, the present no longer mattered. This year, that script didn't run. It wasn't because I suddenly became more disciplined or immune to temptation. The difference was subtler. I didn't panic when things felt off. I didn't treat the stall as an emergency. I recognized it as a phase, not a verdict. And because of that, I stayed engaged instead of checking out. That shift showed up in small, almost unremarkable decisions. We made less food during the holidays, about half of what we normally would. For the first time, some long-standing non-negotiables quietly disappeared. There was no dramatic declaration, no guilt-ridden restraint, just a different calculation happening in the background. What surprised me most was how I handled leftovers. Growing up, throwing food away felt wrong, almost immoral. Finishing everything on the table was a rule, not a preference. But this time, when the holidays passed and the food lingered, I made a different choice. I threw it away. Not casually and not without noticing the discomfort, but without turning that discomfort into self-punishment. That moment mattered more than I expected, because it meant I no longer saw eating as a way to resolve tension. I wasn't using food to close emotional loops. I was willing to let something go, even if it felt uncomfortable, instead of carrying it forward in my body. Beyond the holidays, there were other signals that something deeper was changing. My strength increased. I started lifting weights that once felt completely out of reach. The numbers on the bar moved even when the numbers on the scale didn't. My clothes fit differently. Walking through the city no longer came with a constant mental scan for pain. My joints complained less. My movement felt cleaner, lighter. None of that shows up in a weekly weigh-in. Those changes don't announce themselves. They don't give you the dopamine hit of a big drop on the scale, but they accumulate. And when you start paying attention to them, the narrative shifts. Progress stops being something you demand and starts being something you observe. The biggest difference, though, wasn't physical. It was how I responded internally. When a week went nowhere, I didn't feel derailed. I didn't need to compensate. I stayed with the process, even when it wasn't rewarding in the way I expected. For the first time, not seeing results didn't make me question whether I belonged in the effort at all. I didn't give up. And that might sound simple, but for me, it was entirely new. And once you realize you can stay without collapsing, the idea of starting over begins to lose its power. We're moving into a new year, and for the first time, I'm not resetting anything. There's no clean slate fantasy, no dramatic restart, no promise that this time everything will be different because the calendar changed. What I have instead is continuity. I'm carrying this forward exactly as it is, unfinished, imperfect, but intact. That might not sound exciting, but it's deeply stabilizing. For a long time, I believed progress required urgency, that if I wasn't moving fast, I was falling behind. That mindset pushed me to chase extremes, harder rules, tighter timelines, bigger targets, thinking that intensity was proof of commitment. What these 100 days showed me is that speed creates pressure, and pressure eventually demands an escape. Consistency doesn't. Consistency is quiet. It doesn't care about motivation or mood, it adapts. And adaptation is what I'm taking with me into what comes next. I now understand that different seasons require different rules. Winter doesn't respond to the same structure as summer. Energy changes, capacity changes, and pretending otherwise isn't discipline, it's denial. What's different now is that I'm willing to adjust before things break. I don't need to wait for a crisis to make changes. I don't need to punish myself for miscalculations. I can respond early, gently, and intelligently. That alone makes this process sustainable in a way it never was before. The scale will eventually reflect that, I'm certain of it, but it's no longer the metric that decides whether I'm succeeding or failing. The real measure is whether I stay engaged when progress slows, whether I continue showing up when the reward isn't immediate. These 100 days didn't give me an ending. They didn't give me closure or certainty or a neat conclusion I could point to with pride. What they gave me was direction, a way forward that doesn't rely on momentum or perfection, but on presence. I know now that I don't need to rush this. I don't need to force outcomes. The only thing worth forcing is the habit of staying. One day at a time, one adjustment at a time, and over time, that quiet persistence will do what urgency never could. Not all progress announces itself. Some of it simply stays. This journey wasn't about hitting a number. It was about breaking a pattern. For years, progress ended the moment things slowed down. This time, it didn't. The most important change wasn't physical. It was learning how to stay present when results weren't immediate. Real growth happens when you stop reacting emotionally to setbacks and start responding intelligently to reality. Life doesn't move in straight lines, and neither does progress. When you accept that, you stop quitting on yourself. You stop restarting your life every few months, and that's when change finally becomes permanent. Core lesson and how to apply it. The lesson is simple but difficult. Don't judge your progress by short-term results. Judge it by whether you stay in the process. In your own life, this means resisting the urge to quit when motivation fades or conditions change. Instead of asking, "Why isn't this working?" ask, "What needs to adjust right now?" Consistency isn't about intensity, it's about adaptability. Question for you. When progress slows down, what helps you more? Sticking to your routine or adjusting it? Please comment your answer below so everyone can learn from different perspectives. And if this resonated with you, consider subscribing to Deep Body Lab. Your support gives the channel the energy to keep creating deeper, more meaningful content.